Hi, Pip Hodgson here. I'm one of the clinical advisors for NHSX and have been working with the National Procurement Hub to deliver the new frameworks for the clinical communication tools. We've also got Brian Stratford on the call as well from the Procurement Hub, so we should be able to answer any questions that you've got as quickly as possible. As a bit of housekeeping, could I ask that you put any questions in the chat? There's quite a lot of you on the call, so it would be easier to see them on the chat, and Nicola will shout these out to me as we go through the presentation. Please feel free to do that at any point. You don't have to wait to the end to ask questions, and we'll try and make it as informal as we can given the size of the call. But to give you an overview in a sense of what we've tried to achieve and what we've done, we always knew that communication really struggled on the front line, and I myself as an A&E nurse know no more than that experience and how frustrating it can often be. And Matt Hancock put a mandate out to say that he wants to phase out pages by the end of 2021. Now, the COVID pandemic gave us an absolute platform on which to be able to deliver part of this ask much quicker than initially intended. So we looked to develop a framework that meant that clinical communication tools could be called down from by commissioners, but we would take that procurement burden away from them in order to be able to expedite this part of the communication process more quickly. So we went through a robust OJU process, OJU being the official journal of European Union. And usually that takes, about 25 weeks. We expedited it and did it over 14 weeks, but we did that with some clear intentions. Now, after speaking to commissioners, both regional colleagues, local commissioners, CCGs, trust CIOs, a number of suppliers, and a number of clinicians, everyone thought that a framework like this would be much better to utilise because it gave open and transparent platform out there in which to be able to drill down on. So we've completed this process and we published the framework on the NHSX website last Thursday. And we are now working through what the process is to be able to release funds to these suppliers. And I'll come on to that a bit later in the webinar. Also to note that the webinar is being recorded. So if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask, they'll be shared later, but also you can come back and you can replay it. The recording will be available on the NHSX Futures workspace as well. So breaking down the stage of the OJU, we took a PIN notification out to the market, a pre-information notification, and that lasted for 35 days. It was the maximum length of time we could do, and we did that to really stimulate the market as wide as possible. We wanted to make sure that everyone knew that we were going out for this piece of work, and we wanted to be able to encourage as many people as possible to take part. Over 140 suppliers and organisations came back to us in that PIN period, expressing an interest that they wanted to be on the framework. Now, to break it down into a bit more detail, here's the procurement timeline that we then followed. That included moderation and evaluation, reviewing of the documents, and the release of the tenders. We've shared this with you so that you can see the process that took place, but also to give commissioners more support in terms of if they wanted to do a procurement process like this, how they might go about doing it and what that entails. The framework itself, Brian, I don't know if you want to jump in at this point and just to give a bit of an overview about the framework itself and how the Procurement Hub will manage this.
Yeah, so we're stages at the moment of finalising the framework agreements with each of the successful suppliers. Once we've done that with all 25 successful suppliers, the framework can then be used by commissioners to award contracts, either through a direct award or through further smaller competitions. The reason why we're still closing the gap on the framework agreements is that the localized call-off agreements that will be used between the customer and directly with the supplier is based on the terms and conditions of the framework. So we're just ironing out some of those first, and then all customers can use the framework, like I said, either as a direct award or in future further competitions, and us as the hub will be there to support everyone in either process that they choose.
Thanks, Brian. So the framework is going to be hosted on the NHSX website. It's already live. You can go on it now, and it will actually be open for a series of 24 months with the possible extension for a further 12. There is only funding available at the moment for the first 12 months, and that money has to be spent in year, and it's specifically been outlined for the use in secondary care. Now, that doesn't mean that it cannot be used at a regional level to support other areas of work that potentially might be happening elsewhere, but the focus of this money to begin with is on trusts. So NHSX is committed to covering licence costs via revenue spend. We've got nearly £3 million to spend within this year, and that's going to be allocated on a fair spend allocation, which the regions already know about. We're confident that we can deliver the first part of the phasing out the bleeps journey with that pot of money. NHSX are working towards actually how do we scale that up and how do we offer that out to potential other areas of the system, i.e. primary care, community care. But that's, as I said before, not the intention of this first round of money. We're looking to see if that money will come later on, either at the end of the year or next year. Because we were able to get the money through the COVID-19 Article 32 route, it meant that we raised a PO through the DHSE, so the Department of Health and Social Care mechanism. That means that NHSX is a vehicle for that money and for the region. So regions will have to bid for that money. Once the bid is in place, we have to identify what supplier they would like to use and the number of licenses, and we will raise a PO on their behalf in order to directly give the money to that supplier. We're hoping that this will be as streamlined as possible. We've indicated around 2 weeks, but until the first bid comes in, we can't say for certain. So that might be a bit tweaking. It might be quicker. Hopefully it will be, but that is an estimate based on what we've done historically. We think 2 weeks is about right and to be able to turn that around. So here's a list of successful, and I use successful in like inverted commas, as you can see, but you can just all imagine me doing it in the background of the webinar. We're still going through some due diligence checks and finance checks and all the other good stuff that we have to go through to get on the framework. So whilst you might see them now, they may change slightly. They may, a few more might be added or not, but we're pretty confident that those 25 suppliers are, as a minimum, the ones that will be available on the framework, which is really good to see. We've had a number of questions come in throughout the process to say, oh, can we get on the framework now that it's closed? And unfortunately, the deadline has passed, but we recognise that that's quite a hindrance to innovation. We wouldn't want people to not be able to come on if they changed their offer or, had a better offer. So we're working with the Procurement Hub to think about actually, can we open it up at a later interval? What would that look like? How would we go about doing that? So if you are interested, please do let us know, and that will give us a bit more consideration to think about how we take that forward. I think. Any questions? Nick, I think I saw a few pop up actually.
Yes.
Screen.
A few people are just saying that the slides were really quite small and they couldn't see them. And you might want to put that supplier list back on so people can see it. But if you click on that slide and press pin, you can see the full list.
Yeah, give me 2 seconds. I'll do that for you now.
Some people are saying that they have struggled to get sound and to see the slides. And I've just said that we will send the slides round following the meeting. So if you've not been able to see them all now,
yeah,
we
no
will
problem.
send them round.
Yeah. Can everyone see that slide now?
Yes, I can.
Great.
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect. Nick, where are we with questions?
So at the moment, the questions are all around being able to see the slides and being able to get some audio and actually connecting. So it might be that some people have actually missed some of the update because they were having sound and audio issues. there is a question from Matt Pumphrey. Are the licence costs fixed annually across the 2 years?
So, yes, they will be. Brian's nodding. Brian, do you want to give an update on that?
Yeah, so as part of the tender process, asked the each of the bidders to provide us with a cost for each license per user for a year, based over the full 2-year life cycle of the framework. So the costs that you get as part of your procurement will be based per user per year.
And
thanks. Just didn't want to see any inflation in costs after that first year, once we know what it looks like to the trust. So.
Yeah, so the key is the terms and conditions of the contracts. What we did is we did make the framework slightly longer than anticipated, as in 2 years plus a possible extension of a further year. What that then enables you to do is to procure for the same length of time of the framework, up to the period of time in which the framework remains live and open.
Thanks.
Pip, there is another question from Matt Marshall. He is just referencing the point that regions can bid for support towards the licence cost, but can we expand further and define what we mean by this and what we mean by a region?
Yeah, of course. So there are 7 regions within England. So this doesn't include Scotland or Wales. They are the Northwest, Northeast, Midlands, East, London, Southwest, Southeast. And as a region, they buy services, they commission based on their population. So the bid will go towards, as a population health metric, how many licenses do they need to meet the needs of that population. The bid template is available on the framework, so you can see what we've asked them, and we wanted to be really transparent with you about that and about how the approach that we've taken. And yeah, we'll share the link out as well to the link for the URL for the framework, so you can see all of that after this event and with the slide deck as well.
Pip, there's another question, and this might be a question perhaps more for Brian. Presumably trusts are able to use any supplier they want, but they will not receive funding towards a licence if they're not on the supplier list.
Well, the advantage of the frame is that we've done all the due diligence against the suppliers. So the suppliers have met a robust due diligence with regards to their IT security. So you can use other suppliers, but it will be down to the purchaser to make sure that they do all the due diligence checks that's required. I wouldn't go down that route. There are lots of other frameworks that are available that have already done the due diligence tests, but it's a lot of checks if you're going alone.
Yeah, just to clarify that point as well. So trusts are commissioners within their own right. They can absolutely buy whatever services they see fit in a manner in which they see fit, whether this be through G-Cloud, a direct award, HSSF, the DPS, any number of frameworks available. What we're saying is we will pay for the license costs of this framework for the period of 12 months. Now, if there is an existing provider already in place and being used currently and is on the framework, you can be paid for that license model. No problem with that. If you are looking to have a provider that isn't on this framework to do something similar and or either more or less of what the capability or functionality is of the people within this list, then the trust would be asked to fund that themselves.
Yeah. And just to add, with regards to the framework as well, we will be working with the suppliers as well on developing digital roadmaps to ensure that the suppliers meet the requirements of the NHS organisations. So we can do that as a collective and manage the market space appropriately. But what we won't be able to do is do that with, external suppliers. So it's good that we've got a large proportion of, some larger organisations and also some smaller startup companies that all provide really, really good solutions. One of the driving forces for the framework was to make sure that it wasn't cost driven. So 95% of the evaluation of the suppliers was based on quality rather than cost. So we're really trying to drive towards innovation and get really good products for the NHS.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. And if people have any questions about the process that we undertook, more than happy to take that offline and with the Procurement Hub.
Pip and Brian, on that, there's a question from Jeff Wood saying that we're really looking for replacement, not just for pager, bleeps and clinical messaging to reduce apps. Some of these suppliers can do that and some can't. Is there a list associated with what each of them can do? And do we need to go out to competition for, do we need to go out for the competition?
So basically you should, as a buyer, look at your requirements as an organisation or as a buying group. And then once you put your requirements into the framework, it should deliver you what would be the best products that meet your requirements. It may be that it's not a single product. You may need 2 products to meet your overall requirements. And again, that's okay. One of the driving forces through both this framework and, of course, NHS Digital and GPIT Futures is around interoperability and the use of APIs to enable all the different technologies to work together in a seamless cycle. So that's one of the key things that we've been looking at with this procurement as well. So a lot of the suppliers that are on the framework have the capabilities to interact with existing technologies as well. So fundamentally, I think it's down to identifying what the requirements are and then using the set of requirements to find out what the best product is, rather than identifying which products do what. I hope that answers the question.
Jeff, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thanks very much.
There's another question here from Omar Ali. If a supplier has a longer contract, e.g. 5 years, does that mean NHSX pays the first and the trust pays the rest?
Yes, that would be right. And also, it shouldn't hinder any pre-existing contracts that you may already have in place today. So we do know that some trusts will already be using some suppliers on the framework. That's fine. You can account for the licenses for this year, but you'll need to fund it for future years.
And Omar, I think that answers your follow-up question in the chat. But if you feel that it hasn't, just please come off mute and you can elaborate.
Thank you. Yeah, answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question from Carl Woodruff. Do you envisage all approved projects will be fully funded, in brackets, not partially funded, by NHSX in year 1?
So yeah, that's absolutely, that's passionately my aim. And I felt like we went and asked for money that we felt was representative of licenses across all hospital trusts. I think there's something like 223 hospital trusts within England. So it just depends, I guess, what they want to use it for. You know, some people saying we will specifically want it in the area of cardiology. Great, okay, we'll help to support you to deliver that. Some people say that they want it all for their F1 doctors starting in August. Great, fine, we can fund you for that. What we really wanted it to be was, I guess, the pump prime to setting the wheels in motion. I don't think it was ever going to be a full end-to-end process that would support the non-using or the phasing out of bleeps. That sits within Mission 1 within NHSX, and that's a part of a wider programme. This is just the first jigsaw puzzle, first piece of the jigsaw puzzle to get us towards that journey.
There's an interesting question from Zar. As a supplier, should we be approaching a trust or a region directly?
Yeah, always, right? This is the game. This is the cat and mouse game of the NHS. So I would always say, yeah, more than happy to approach. However, trusts can't get to this money themselves individually. It has to be part of a wider regional bid. So the money has to be able to flow through a commissioner. The commissioner will then give it to the trust and all trusts.
Thanks, Pip. I can see that a couple of people are still having sound problems. We apologise, and we will be sharing both the slides and a recording of the webinar, and we hope that the sound as part of that recording is something that's more accessible. So apologies if people have had sound and audio difficulties. There's a question from Michael Bailey. I've done a lot of work on this previously. I've used 2 of the products on the list. They weren't, they didn't meet his purpose. The best one looking forward, seeing that coming from Microsoft, they're writing an extension for Teams, and he's just saying would urge all to contact Microsoft about the same, as seemed very promising. So I think that's just more a point about that there are other products, other solutions, including MS Teams. Pip, you're on mute.
Sorry. A really good point, Michael, that you raised about MS Teams. That there already is a national contract with Microsoft and MS Teams to deliver a better integrated way of working. And that is absolutely something that we are supporting and working alongside of. MS Teams and what that delivers is great in the integrated MDT space. That is absolutely not the same thing as me as an A&E nurse trying to work out where I put a patient in the system. And they're 2 different use cases. So whilst they complement each other really well, and absolutely they do have their places, this isn't to do an either or. This is, I would strongly suggest you do them together rather than in silo. So yeah, for immediate communication on the front line, let's use an app-based product. But when you want to have wider team working and an integrated care, then MS Teams, I would absolutely agree, has its place.
Pip, I think there's further questions just about trying to drill down to the regional allocation of the sort of startup fund. So Matt's asking, so regions will get an allocation based on their population, and trusts within that region will somehow bid for an allocation of that regional amount. Is that correct? And then Elizabeth is asking, who are the regional commissioners?
Can we share the names of the regional commissioners? I think we can, can't we? The regional tech directors. We can put that in the email after. But let me just double check that with Nick if we can. If we can, I will. I'm all for being open and sharing where possible. In terms of the bids, so the bids need to be done at a regional level because it needs to tie in to the wider ways of working and the innovation pot that is available to them. We want them to be able to try and get consistency where possible, rather than say one trust having one solution and another trust having a separate one. It doesn't make sense to do that, and especially not at scale. And as we want to start to consider other areas that people are already beginning to think about, PCN development, ICS development, again, it would make sense to have a more integrated approach. So the regional bids are set out in a template. Again, we'll share that. And that is to take on board not just this year's spend, but where they're going over the next 2 to 3 years as well.
And Pip, I think looking at some of the comments and questions, I think people are almost querying, once they've filled in that bid template, what do they do with it? And who do they send that to?
So it goes through to the Procurement Hub, where it will get reviewed by a panel. I guess actually, Brian, do you want to talk about what will happen there? I feel like I'm talking on your behalf.
Yep, no, it's fine. So the bids come through to us just for us to check through a lot of the governance that needs to be done for the selection of the the chosen supplier of the framework. So we need to check the governance of that, and then we'll be looking at how the choice fits in with the wider picture, and also to see if there's any trends occurring throughout the country with regards to chosen suppliers. And again, we'll put all that together in a digital roadmap that we'll be developing for both the customers and the suppliers. Okay, Pip?
Yeah, all good.
Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't unmute as somebody was trying to be admitted. So Elizabeth is asking, what happens when regional funding is used up and there are multiple providers still wanting to move to the modern communication tools?
Say that again, Nick.
What happens
when the funding dries up?
You know, on the basis that there's a cap.
Yeah, we don't foresee reaching the threshold of the monies that's been allocated for the first year. Well, we did market engagement prior to the tender process, and the costings was associated with the pre-market engagement based on the costings that was provided by the market. We'll also, as part of the hub, as the bids come in, we'll be capturing the spends as they go. So we'll be able to monitor and go back to both customers and NHSX should there be any large disparity within the funding allocation that's been allocated for this project. But we don't foresee that at this moment.
Matt Pumphrey is asking, what are the timescales in which bids should be submitted? Is there a deadline?
Yeah, we've given commissioners to the end of September in which to submit bids, and they can do that from any point from last Thursday until the end of September to submit bids. It was also agreed, we had a webinar with the regional leads a few days ago to take them through this, and they were talking about the fair allocated spend, and their view was happy to do it in that way, but if there's anything left over in the pot and they wanted to redistribute that money, that they would be happy with a blended approach. So like Brian says, we don't think we're going to be able to cap out. We think we're going to be okay. We don't foresee that. But if there was any overspend in any areas, that this would be allocated to people who would either require more or could use more.
Thanks, Pip. Somebody's asking, is there anything that provides further detail on the wide range of tools available via the framework?
Yep, so on the framework, there should be the list of suppliers, and within the details of the suppliers, there should be a link to each of the supplier sandboxes, which should give a demonstration of the product. Once everything goes live, we do expect customers to come to us as well, and we'll be working up market engagement events with suppliers and customers to work through some of those decision-making processes.
There's a follow-up point, Brian and Pip, from Michael around integrating Microsoft Teams within the clinical systems. But I think Michael was quite keen to explain the point, but he's not able to unmute his or there's no mic on his PC. Michael, maybe that's something that we could pick up with you separately outside the call, to sort of really explore, and we can make sure then that we're clear in the communications around that, that we send out following this webinar. So, looking through the questions, I think we've covered. I think we have covered most of the questions that have been coming through. I'm wanting to check if anybody has any other questions or anything that they would like further clarified or for us to go into more detail around.
Hello, I'm Matt Marshall. I've put another question at 2:30 in the chat about the trusts not using the regional funding, but can they use the framework and use their own funding? You follow me?
Oh, interesting question. Brian, one for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the framework is open to NHS England as a whole, so all regions can use the framework. The funding has been allocated, like Pip said, for startups, if you like. So, and with the framework being 2 years plus one, we expect people to, use the framework for extensions, the contracts that they perhaps raise this year. So yeah, absolutely. And again, we're here as the hub to fully support you, to help the procurement process go as smoothly as possible.
Great, thank you.
And there's a question from Elizabeth around will regional tech directors responsible for the sort of regional bids communicate that to NHS trust providers, and if so, kind of how is that working, or is it all coming through the bid and then we'll go to the regional directors?
Yeah, so let's just be really, really clear. No money will be going to regional commissioners and or trusts. Money will be raised via a PO that is being held by NHSX and through the bids allocated, where they have to identify the number of licenses they need, the provider they'll be using, and the amount that costs in total. That will then be raised directly to the supplier via the PO. There won't be any money going to trust, there won't be any money going to regional commissioners. The commissioners will outline through the bid what they want. NHSX as the vehicle will then pay the supplier via an already pre-raised PO. Also, apologies if that came across quite assertive. Just wanted to make sure it was really clear.
Just want to check if there's any more kind of questions around that before we move on. I've seen a few people kind of asking if suppliers and some of the products can be amended when we put out the slides and the communication, and the answer is yes, we can absolutely do that. Matt's asked, I see that multi-tone are also on the framework. Would it be possible to bid for funding license to replace pagers, or would that be via the alternative approach? You're on mute, Pip.
I think I keep admitting people and accidentally putting myself on mute. Sorry, guys. Yeah, absolutely fine with multi-tone. Perfect example of why the framework was built in the first place.
And Oliver's asking, how are the number of licenses used going to be reported on?
So as part of the spec, we wanted there to be a reporting dashboard made available to both commissioners and to NHSX that demonstrated how and where the products were being used. And this focused mainly on volumetrics and other analytics and BI information. I don't know if you want to add any more on that, Brian.
No, that's about it. It's all covered under the the overarching technical specification that we wrote for each of the winning bidders, to make sure that they met the reporting standards that we wanted as part of ongoing lessons learned, I suppose, from previous rollouts.
There's a question about the contract mechanism. Would trusts also have the call-off contract to, or would trusts also be able to have the call-off contract to offer extensions on licenses?
Yeah, so the buying mechanism as itself coming through region doesn't necessitate the requirement track to be between the region and the supplier. So for example, if a region decides to have 3 or 4 suppliers, you're more than happy, you can have 3 or 4 suppliers if that's what meets the requirements of the region, and then the call-off agreements can be drawn down off the framework between the trusts or a group of trusts and the supplier. So the actual buying and the agreements themselves don't always align. So yeah, the trusts can have call-off agreements, as can groups of trusts. If you can have a buying consortium, if you like.
I think Brian has answered Jamie's question around different trusts wanting different products from different suppliers across a region. I think you've answered that. But Jamie, do feel free to unmute and jump in if you feel that your question hasn't been answered. If you can. I mean, essentially, I think the answer. Oh, yeah, and Jamie said yes. It's that you have. So thank you, Brian. And Elizabeth is asking, can we have distributed details of each of the 7 regions following the call for absolute clarity? Elizabeth, is something that we're going to look into and share the best way of contacting those regional leads and what those best email addresses to share should be. But yes.
Nick, am I mute? Am I mute?
No.
I'm just shared in the chat, Elizabeth. I have just shared with you information about the regional teams, who they are, from the NHS England page. So you can see their geography, their split, and where they are within that. So that should actually be better for you.
Elizabeth, I hope that helps answer and sort of gives information, but we can, if not, let us know and we can supply further details. Yes, good, excellent. I think we have gone through and answered the questions. What we will do is make sure we keep a copy of all the questions so that we take forward any points that we need to take forward, and based on some of the sort of commonly recurring questions and themes, we'll make sure that we feed that into our communications about this going forward. I think on that basis, it's an opportunity to see if Pip and Brian, if you want to, say anything else, or if anybody else has any final points.
Yeah, just to say thanks very much for everyone for joining. We've had a great number of people join us for the webinar today. Please feel free to either email myself and Brian. We'll send an email out following this event. If you have any further questions or queries, or how we can support you, if you're a supplier looking to try and gain traction, or if you're a trust and you want to be able to deliver a product that you think would be useful, we're happy to do the engagement and to manage that. Anything from a framework perspective will go through the Procurement Hub, and that will be managed for the total life of the framework, so for the total 3 years. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining, and I hope that you got something positive out of it. Brian, anything from you?
No, just to encourage everyone really to go on the NHSX website and have a look at the sandboxes and get a feel for a variety of products that are out there. You know, some of them are more standard than others that just offer, you know, the chat functions and sharing of images, but there's other products that are really good with interoperability to existing systems that, you know, is quite exciting really. So yeah, just have a look.
And there is actually one sort of very final, I think very pertinent question from Sophie around, you know, how the outcomes of this will be evaluated. If you want to say, like, a final point on that. I know that we've sort of said that.
I just did my wrap up right there, Nick. And there
was a very pertinent question from Sophie. A very good question.
So we will run an evaluation at different intervals actually throughout this procurement. So we're working with the regional director to understand what the impact has been of the framework in general. And we can do that via, you know, historic baseline data and volumetrics in terms of usability, productivity, and efficiency. But I think more importantly to us, the evaluation will be the approach that we used, and whether NHSX has benefit in that. And I think we can really demonstrate that to some degree already. But we will do a whole evaluation report and a case study pending the 12 months of this framework. Brian, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I think, you know, as part of the hub, we'll be collating a lot of data as part of this process. I think there is savings as a result through efficiency, as Pip's alluded to. So I think it's a really, really, really good opportunity really to start utilizing digital tech.
I'll give you the rest of your afternoon back, guys. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.